Lots of people show you how to do drawings, but in this video I'm going to be vulnerable and show you when it all goes wrong. How I ruin this background, how I attempt to fix it, why I think it went wrong, and then how I actually do this blue background, this sky with the moon. Stay tuned, you're going to love this one. Now you may be wondering why I used that pastel matte paper, and as I start to put a bit of blue around the edge of the wolf here, I'll explain my reasonings and why I wish I hadn't used dark grey pastel matte paper. Basically, I wanted a nice even mid-tone. I thought that would help me select in the colour tones, the lightness of the sky. The wolf, the foreground is quite dark really, the rocks and the grasses, so it seems to make sense to do it. I transferred my drawing over. You can trace it or freehand or whatever you want to do. And I'm just putting in some of the blue edging just to help me get a feel for the setting of the wolf having that blue sky behind it. All seemed okay, all seemed like the right thing to do. Putting it in with a pencil just because it gives me that bit more control. I've also got a stick there that I can use as well, and I'm just blending it in to push it down into the surface of the paper. Okay, so all seemed like a decent idea at the time, and I already noticed at this stage that even though I'm blending down into the tooth of the paper with my finger, it's really showing the roughness of this paper. The paper perhaps is a little bit rougher than I would normally see on pastel matte, and as most of us know, there's a bit of variance between the darks of pastel matte and towards the lights. The lighter colours are smoother. Did I perhaps have a little bit of grease or something on my finger? I don't think so. But as I'm trying to put some pastel stick down, I can already see that it's kind of creating a mark just in front of the head of the wolf, where the where the eyes are, where the head rounds around, and no matter how much pastel I'm putting on there, it's not getting better, it's actually getting worse. And you can see it's going quite dark looking. That's a problem straight off. I knew that was going to be a big issue. So I just brushed it off. So I used a stiff bristle brush and brushed all that pastel off. I could still see the dark mark there. So I thought I'd need to remove even more pastel, and it was quite frustrating straight away. So I'm using a putty rubber, or you can use this is actually some blue tack I think, just to try and get as much of that off as possible. And I'd never really had this problem before, so as I said, whether I had a bit of grease on my finger or something, but it seemed to be more about the texture, the rough texture of the paper. I can't really tell, but fortunately at this stage I knew if I couldn't sort this out, then I could always get a new piece of paper and just do another drawing on there, which is one of the benefits. If you trace, it's going to take, say 15 minutes to get a new drawing on a new piece of paper. If I'd done this freehand, I'd probably be talking an hour instead. So with that pastel off, I thought, okay, I'll just go in with a softish pastel stick and do that edging again, fully expecting this to blend out perfectly fine this time, as it has on pretty much all the other 100 drawings that I've done with pastel. So I put plenty of pastel down because all I really wanted was a flat colour. And then I thought, right, definite clean finger as well. Use a different finger even and blend that in. That should obviously work. But it still, even then, was not creating the smoothness that I wanted. I didn't want to see any graininess. Now I could have used a new stump and tried pushing that in. Perhaps that would have worked a bit better, or perhaps even put some white down on there first, white pastel. So as that didn't work, I decided to wipe that pastel off as well and instead go for some white gouache. And that's probably what I should have done straight away. If I needed the paper to be that dark really, I probably picked up the dark grey because it's kind of my go-to paper that works on pretty much all of the pet portraits and animal portraits that I do, because it's usually fairly dark subjects. I used it on my latest elephant one, which had, you know, smooth areas in the background, no problem. So this is just white gouache thinned with a little water, and I painted that over the whole of the background area. Okay, that's all I did, nothing more than that. Thinking, okay, it's the roughness of the paper, we see through the blue. I'll put this white down on there instead, and then if we see anything through the blue, it's going to be white, so that'll be all right. That'll give me a nice flat background that I'm after. So I'm just going to carry on now and paint this background in. So with that white gouache background painted in, and that's all dry, I dried with a hairdryer. Got some PanPastels out, because I thought perhaps they'll give me the best bet of creating a fairly even background. The background doesn't need to be a completely flat blue, doesn't really matter, but I did want it to be fairly even so it's not that distracting. And I've got my printer paper by the side, that's just standard inkjet paper, and I'm mixing up kind of a mid-tone blue, trying it on some of the excess pastel matte paper I've got, the same colour. If it looks okay on there, that's roughly the colour I want. Should go perfectly fine on the gouache. I'm also lightening some as well, and I'm making a bigger pile so that I don't have to keep mixing back and forth. I want to be able to get a good, as I said, fairly even colour going on there. So starting in that top left hand corner, using circular motions, and immediately that I put it on there, I'm thinking, I don't know, this just is not looking that flatter colour. It should work okay if I did it, but in skies, that's where I like the colour to be smooth. Same when I'm doing oil paintings, especially if the drawing is quite small, because if you can see on a canvas with oil paintings, you can see all of the canvas texture. I just think it doesn't seem like a real looking sky, because skies don't have textures and uniform textures in them, especially at least when they're blue. So that's kind of the problem. I'm trying to get a flat color, but even with the gouache white, what I'm seeing is the texture. Now, okay, I'm probably hypercritical with it, and most people would just go for it and it'd still look really good in the end. But even though I'm putting down more PanPastel, adding into the tooth of the paper, and even though we've got the white gouache, I think it's an improvement what we're seeing, but I just don't think it's right. But at this stage I'm thinking, okay, there's nothing else to do now rather than just give this a good go. If I don't like it, I'll just scrap this piece of paper, throw it away, and try something else, have a different stab at it. So at this very early stage I thought, nah, this is rubbish. It's definitely going to end up in the bin, so I might as well just use this as a practice. And I got a pastel stick and put lots of pastel down. A real thick coating of pastel. I thought I'd blend it in, as you can see, with the PanPastel tool, see if that will get it nice and smooth. Just trialing things out now, making use of the paper and testing things. Okay, seeing what's actually going wrong. And I'm pretty sure that it was a rough texture, combined with the darkness of the paper, and because such a large area is light, looking back on it now, what I should have done was gone for a much lighter paper, so it would have had less texture. And if I wanted that dark grey around the subject and the rock, I could have painted that on in gouache instead, or put it down on with pastel, the wolf and the foreground like that first, just like a blocking colour. I could have sprayed that with the Clairefontaine fixative spray, that would have sealed that down, and I would have used that light paper again for the background. The background was much more important than I really should have given it, I didn't give it enough thought, to be honest. So I carried on doing this pastel just to see if it would even out and would be workable, but it wouldn't, not to the standard that I wanted. It's a lovely reference photo that I'd got from Wildlife Reference Photos, and I wanted to do that subject justice. I wanted to really, make a good drawing of it and do a good lesson from it. So I carried on, just roughly putting pastel down, not being happy with it, and just gave up on this first attempt. So as you can see, didn't look great, couldn't get an even colour around the head, and I decided to use a different paper. And the paper I decided to use was the light blue. Now in real life it's a bit darker than it is here. It's a bit bluer as well, but nowhere near as dark as that dark grey. And as you can see, I've just got that same piece of printer paper by the side, my PanPastels, and look how much more even it's actually going on. So I retransferred the drawing over. Now the texture of this paper is much smoother than the dark grey. So that's something that 4 years on I've just learned a lesson for myself. If I need a sky that's really smooth, I need smooth paper. If I've got lots of grain to the paper, it's just not going to work. It's not going to give a smooth enough coating on there. And I could tell straight away this was going much better. And I also made the decision, because with PanPastels rather than pastel sticks, if we're using pastel sticks, the stick is that colour. Okay, so you can keep putting more and more pastel on and it stays that colour. So eventually, once you've got an even coating, it's a flat colour. Now, if you look at the duckling I did on my Patreon channel, demos, I've got a blue flat colour behind it. And I also used this light blue paper on that. So I was thinking better on that particular demo. And it turned out really flat, vibrant and even, just what I wanted. And I was using, if I remember rightly, sticks for that. When you use PanPastels, you're mixing colours and you never really, unless you're just dipping into the same pan, and I didn't have a pan, even though I got the full set, that was the exact colour I wanted, and that's common with pastels. I knew I had to mix it. So I also knew I wasn't going to achieve a perfectly even same colour flatness. So rather than fight against that, I went with it, and I thought, you know what, very often in the sky we've got little wispy clouds, or variations, or mists rising, and I thought I'll play with that, and rather than really challenge myself and struggle to get more of a flat colour, I'll make it deliberately more uneven. So I'll create kind of a bit of a cloud or a mist or a variance in the sky. I knew I had to go a bit darker at the top and lighter at the bottom, as per normal anyway, but I just thought, yeah, I'll do this instead, and I'll make a bit of variance in there and then put the moon actually on that. But you can see it's all working much better now, and as soon as I'd done it, I could feel the difference, and I was much more relaxed rather than being frustrated trying to fight that darker paper. But lesson learned. This is how we actually learn. We don't really learn that much when we have success all the time, because it's just almost like you know, churning things out and oh, there's another one that worked and cracking on with that. But when things don't work, then you've got to think. You can either give up on it, you can settle for a subpar sky that would have been okay-ish, but I would always have been looking at it and seeing imperfections and things wrong and wouldn't have been happy with it. That probably would have transferred then into the time when I was doing the wolf and the rock. I'd be thinking, maybe even subconsciously, what's the point doing my best work on the wolf if I'm not happy with the sky? So I use that time to try things out, learn from it. Lesson learned, I can take that knowledge now further and use it and apply it when I do all other works that's, you know, got a light coloured sky. I can really start thinking about that. So all I'm doing here, as you can see, is just mixing up some colours with the PanPastels and just filling that background in. Okay, simple enough. I think that's all I need to do with the background. And I think best thing to do is put the moon on there now, because that's something else I've never done before. And if I'm going to mess it up again, this is the point I'm going to do it at. So let's get that in first. Now online you can buy these plastic tools, shape thingies that you would use with graphical design and drawing. You can get them in all different shapes and sizes, and this is what I happen to have in the cupboard. So I checked out the size the moon was in the reference photo using this larger circle, and I'm just indicating the shape. It doesn't go all the way around, it's more of a 3/4, so I'm just using that. It's kind of a purpley white rather than a pure white to the moon, and a bit of blue in there as well. So it's quite subdued, just a suggestion of it. And then around the bottom it kind of disappears, comes around and curves, and then goes to, you know, barely being able to see it at all. So I've got that shape of the moon correct in the position I wanted it. That was nice and easy to do. I don't want a hard edge around there, so I'm making sure my finger is spotlessly clean, and then just going around that, rubbing it and just softening that whole edge, and I'll soften it even more than that as well. Now I want to keep that sky really clean. I'm being careful with it. I don't want to mess it up now. I don't particularly want to start again if I don't have to. So I'm getting the glassine paper on there, my small magnets just to stop it moving at all, and then I'm just very lightly indicating the shapes that I'm seeing on the reference photo of the moon. As I said, it's more of a kind of a purpley blue, and I'll lighten it all with white. There's nothing pure white, and it's really subtle, so I'm not concerned about that blue being under there at all. If I wanted to have a crisp moon, what I think the best bet would be to have done would have been to have masked out the moon. Okay, so at that stage with the circle I would have just pulled off the mask, and then I would have had a pure piece of paper underneath. But I wanted that blue that I've got on there now, just adding this kind of a lightish purpley colour, warm purple, blending it in, keeping it all soft, and then lightening it with just a white very lightly on top of it, just for that suggestion. Now all those colours will mix together, so even though I'm putting the white on top, you can see it's still going to show some of that warm purple, still going to show some of the blue, and when I blend them all together, that's when I'm going to get that colour mix which looks quite realistic in the end. So I'm not putting a massive amount of pastel down, just enough to lighten the tone, just so it stands out a bit more. So nothing complicated. I'm not going to put in loads of details, but the thing to get right is the tonal value. All of this needs to be a little lighter than the background. Okay, and as I come into the middle section of the moon and the lower section, that's when it's going to get even softer, even subtler, until it really just disappears out into the blue on the edge. You see, so I'm barely touching the paper surface there, putting down very, very little pastel at all. I don't want the moon to be the big star of the show. This is acting as giving us a feeling of depth in the image, recession. You know, when you've got a lot of depth in an image, it can look more dramatic. So that's what I want. Now in the center upper part, the blue even needs to go quite a lot lighter, because if I leave the blue really dark, it'll look like there's a hole in the moon, and like you're looking through a punched hole in it, looking through to the blue sky. So I need to make sure all of the tonal values of this is correct. All of it needs to be that bit lighter than the background. Even the dark sections need to be lighter than the background. So this is real-time speed. So you can see I'm not taking a lot of time. I'm not putting a big amount of effort into detailing or anything. But already is starting, I think, to look like a very realistic moon. Now the whole drawing took me around about 7 hours, I think, for this one. It's not a very big drawing, but even still I wanted to put quite a high amount of detail in there into the wolf, and to show you that even when you're doing a small drawing, you can still make it look realistic. We won't be doing every hair on drawings this size, but we will be thinking about clumps of hairs, and I think the lighting is probably even more important on small drawings, because you don't have all the detail that's going to carry the work and create a dramatic look to it as we would get with, you know, really big drawings. So when you're working small, you really have to get your tonal values right and your colors right, especially those tonal values that I mention in virtually all of my drawings. So it's going to be more of the suggestion of detail in the wolf, the rocks and the grasses, rather than, you know, individual haze going on there. Now, as this once again is, as I said, about 7 hours or so, I don't want you sitting through all that time, so I will be speeding areas up. Now notice that blue section of the moon in that top corner, or the top section of it, and see how dark it is. Now I'm putting some of that white over the top, because remember I said it needed to be a little bit lighter than the background, or it looked like a hole was punched in it, which it just did. And now I'm blending it together, and you can see that central part is a bit lighter already. It's looking more like that subdued moon. So that's how I ruined the background at the beginning. Basically wrong choice of paper. Shouldn't have used a really dark coloured paper. Should have gone in with a pastel stick, because it's more opaque and you can get a lot more pastel down. But I wanted to show you how I fixed it using that light blue paper, which is now my favourite paper. My favourite colour pastel mat paper by far. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget, I've got lots and lots of other videos. Like and subscribe so you don't lose me on YouTube forever. And hope to see you on my Patreon channel.